I'm Greg Shapiro. Let's queer up the worldview. Botswana repeals anti-sodomy law, marking major LGBTQ plus legal milestone. Section 164 of the Southern African Nations Penal Code criminalized same-sex relations, carrying a possible 7-year prison sentence. In 2019, Botswana's High Court struck down the law as unconstitutional. Writing for the court, Judge Michael Leburu stated, quote, "Human dignity is harmed when minority groups are marginalized. Sexual orientation is not a fashion statement. It is an important attribute of one's personality. Personal autonomy on matters of sexual preference and choice must therefore be respected. Any criminalization of love or finding fulfillment in love dilutes compassion and tolerance," end quote. Although the government appealed, the ruling was upheld in 2021, rendering the law unenforceable. Now, Attorney General Dick Bayford has formally amended the Penal Code. The remaining portion of Section 164 now applies only to bestiality. In Botswana, LGBTQ plus individuals can serve in the military, are protected from job discrimination, and transgender people can update their legal gender markers. Currently, a same-sex couple is challenging the government for marriage equality rights. Botswana seems to be taking gradual steps toward inclusivity and LGBTQ plus freedom. Well, let's hope that other African nations honor what Judge Michael Leburu said, and I'm going to say it again, it's important to listen to this, quote, "Human dignity is harmed when minority groups are marginalized. Sexual orientation is not a fashion statement," and I am proof. "It is an important attribute of one's personality. Personal autonomy on matters of sexual preference and choice must therefore be respected. Any criminalization of love or finding fulfillment in love dilutes compassion and tolerance," end quote. Brilliantly said.
Exactly. And I love that this is happening on the continent of Africa because, you have so many Christian fundamental, I don't like to litmus test people's, Christian faith, but you have very hardline, Christian organizations like the Heritage Foundation, Focus on the Family, James Dobson, whatever. You have them all going into Africa and pouring millions and millions of dollars into outreach to Uganda, to Kenya, to these other African nations, and they take a very hardline stance against homosexuality and queer people. So the fact that Botswana and Mr. Justice Leburu, came to this decision, it says a lot because it could have gone in a very different direction. Right. So now that we have a man of God at the table here with Bishop Durrell, I just want to say, do you think that was like a miracle, or like what's your take on that?
It was certainly fortunate. It needs to spread. The Global Justice Institute actually does quite a bit of work all over the world, including Africa. And so the governments are what they are, but we are also in contact with smaller communities, tribal leaders that still try to maintain their history and identity. And we are told over and over, all of this homo hatred was imported. All of this comes from Europe. This is not our ancient history. This is part of colonialism. And the evangelical church's primary export is hatred, and a lot of it has been given to African nations. So I'm glad when they sort of pushed back. The Republic of South Africa has protections in their constitution for LGBTQ plus people, and it's I think they were the first country in Africa to have marriage equality, and so there's a lot of hope. But when we see where all of sort of the cruelty and the dangerous stuff is, those are European and American exports that we've just dropped off there, and now people are hurt because of it.
People there are suffering, absolutely, yes.
Now, can I ask you, just because, you have a religious perspective on this, when you say that they're exporting hate, I don't doubt that they are, and that's what it is. Do you think that they see that as exporting hate? Like, what is the currency? Like, what are they getting out of that instead of spreading God's love, God's message, whatever their interpretation of the Bible is, but they really focus on policy decisions, like they're very focused on very personal issues. And I kind of wonder if they feel that the West, Europe, the United States has gone so decadent and I use that in quotes, that they actually want like another, they want like another colony that has laws in place that if they ever wanted to go live there, that they don't have to live with the homos.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not a sociologist.
Okay.
But that doesn't keep me from opinions. But no, I think that on their end, on the country's end there, I think a lot of their resistance to new information, although a lot of this information is already 100 years old, but is because when they were colonized, they bought what the West was selling. Okay. And now the West is telling them they're backwards for believing what they sold them and they need to change. And I think there's just some resistance like, no, we're not falling for this again. The reason we believe this is because you told us to 100, 150 years ago. Right. Now you're telling us that we're backwards and wrong for believing what you told us to believe. Get out. We're not changing our mind for you ever again.
I hope there's more resistance.
Yeah. So I hope that's part of the reason why they are so homophobic. And so is that also once you have an enemy that you can profit from, and that's the bad guy, that's the devil, well, you're loath to give that up because you get a lot of political action out of that.
So queer people are the stand-in for everything that's wrong in their view of everything. So.
And then the Americans who are exporting all this silliness, and maybe I'm way harsh on this, I don't give them that much benefit. Like the people on that end, I can sort of see why, but the people, I have a very cynical view of them. I think they know what they're doing. I think they know it's faithful.
That was my question.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, Emerson said, be careful what you're worshiping, because what you're worshiping, you're becoming. And I think these people, so-called Christians, Western American, that they have so worshipped violence and hatred so long, you'll never be better than your God. So they are exporting hatred because that is their religion. I'm going to say something super controversial, and maybe even more so because I'm a staple Jewish people. But in a lot of Christianity, now this is not every school of thought, and this is not the original school of thought, but I would say probably in most schools of thought in Christianity for the last 1,700 years, Christianity has been a worshiper of violence. If the only way I can be in relationship with God is because the best person who ever lived to be tortured to death, and that has to have happened, and I have to believe it for it to work, I am worshiping torture, I'm worshiping cruelty, I'm worshiping death, I'm worshiping violence. I cannot possibly worship violence and be an agent of peace. I cannot worship cruelty and torture and be a person who exudes love. So Christians who say Jesus is love and Jesus is peace and the Prince of Peace, and they have this dichotomy. And so they're saying this, and they even want to believe it, but then the proof is in the pudding, which is this. And so I think Christians have so painted themselves into a corner that they want to be loving and kind, but they worship violence.
It's a death cult.
And then the right wing of that makes no apology for it. They don't struggle with the weirdness of it, and they are just pushing hate in the name of God who loves you so much that if you don't do it my way, it just happens my way, it's God's way, then you will suffer and burn in hell. But it has become a cult of hate and violence and fear. That is not what which is why a lot of us at Sunshine Cathedral don't even call ourselves Christians. We say we're trying to follow Jesus' example. Jesus the Jew, by the way. And so we're trying to walk that path. And Christians have diverted that dramatically.
Well, the thing you were saying, there's a Joni Mitchell song from 40 years ago called Tax Free, where she talks about this crazy preacher and who's preaching love like hate, she says, and he's calling for large donations. And the idea is that how can he speak for the Prince of Peace when he's hawk-right militant? Joni said that 40 years ago, and she predicted this. She was right.
It's just, I don't think there's anything more to add to this other than thank you very much for your explanation. And I love that you're very reasoned about it, and you draw on a lot of, you talk about historical examples, you go back 1,700 years, I could barely remember yesterday. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. And the good news is, though, that like Botswana, and it just takes one for there then to be two. So there is a rainbow behind these dark clouds.
Yeah,
Good.
I believe that.
There is no other queer nonprofit media platform like this in the entire world. Support our LGBTQ stories by sharing them and subscribing to Queer News Tonight.